Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Tuning in to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. This week, you guys, I want to talk a little bit about diets. All kinds of different fad diets, for the most part. I asked some of my friends and some of you listeners, what you guys would be interested in hearing more about. What do you want me to research or to talk about? And one of the most popular answers was a comparison of different diets. So like keto, the Whole30, paleo, the DASH diet, gluten-free, Mediterranean diets. And that's what I want to talk about today. Really, I want this to be informative and helpful for you guys in selecting whether or not you would be interested in these. Each of these diets have very different, approaches to how to help you be healthy and different goals. So we're going to go in depth about each of those today, and then we'll sum it up at the end. So first off, I'm going to start with the ketogenic diet. You've probably heard of keto before. A lot of my friends have tried this out, and they really liked it for the most part. Keto is low carb and high fats, so good fats, and it can really help you with a bunch of different health issues. So there have been several studies that have shown that this type of diet can help with weight loss and overall health improvement, and they've even been suggested to have benefits regarding diabetes, cancer, epilepsy, and Alzheimer's outcomes. So, what is keto? It's very low carb and high fat. So it has a lot in common with Atkins. If you remember that low carb diet from like 10 years back, it was really popular. And it really involves just reducing your carbs by a lot and replacing it with fat instead. So instead of putting it into protein or something else, then you're really going to just subtract from the carbs and move that over into fat. That is going to put your body into a metabolic state that's called ketosis. So what that means is that your body is going to just be more efficient at burning fat for energy. Ketosis is a totally natural metabolic state, and it really tends to happen via, pregnancy, infancy, fasting periods, and any periods of starvation. So what is ketosis, really? It just means that your body is having the fat provide most of the fuel for your body instead. So normally our bodies want to primarily use glucose or blood sugar as the fuel source for most of our cells in the body. But when it comes down to eating more of this fat than we are of carbs, then there's going to be less glucose and there's going to be more of an opportunity for the body to produce ketones out of the fat and use those for energy instead of the glucose and the carbs. So that's why if we're doing a keto diet, we have to have very low carbs and high fats because we need our bodies to turn to the fats to make those ketone bodies out of the fat and use them for the energy instead of carbs. But if we have a lot of carbs in our diet, our body is going to go to the carbs first. That is its primary source and its favorite source. So it's always going to select carbs first. and then ketone bodies. So by reducing the amount of carbs that we're eating and instead putting it into fat, we are going to be using up those carbs, and then it's going to immediately go into those ketone bodies. So that's kind of how that works. It's pretty complex, but that's the TLDR for it. And keto is pretty interesting. In order to do it and get your body into ketosis, you need to eat fewer than 50 grams of carbs per day. For some people, it's as little as 20 grams per day. So that means no candy, no grains, no soft drinks. You also have to cut back on legumes, fruit, and potatoes. So things that you might not normally think of for a diet, you have to cut back on for keto. When you eat this low-carb diet, your hormone levels of insulin are going to go down, and the fatty acids are going to be released from your body fat stores in large amounts. So a lot of those fatty acids then go to your liver, where they are oxidized and turned into ketones, or ketone bodies. And those are the molecules that are going to give your body energy. So unlike fatty acids, the ketones can cross the blood-brain barrier and give you some energy in the brain in the absence of glucose. So that's why it's important that those fatty acids are released and then go into the liver so they can be processed and then cross that blood-brain barrier. So keto is pretty cool, I think. It's really interesting, but it can be very difficult to follow, and you can feel a little bit icky at first as your body is getting used to going into ketosis. I have a couple friends who have tried this a couple times, and it's their go-to when they want to, improve their weight loss goals, but it does make them really grumpy and miserable for a couple of days. So if you try keto and it makes you a little bit grouchy, that's pretty par for keto in my friend's experience. So there are a couple different types of keto diets that you could go on. They have the standard one. It's very low carb, moderate protein, high fat. So for your macros, that's going to be 75% fat, 20% protein, and only 5% carbs. Now, keep in mind, you're supposed to, not really have candy and everything on this one, and that's going to also help you reduce the amount of fructose that you have. So that's why you're not supposed to have a lot of, fruits in this one as well, because remember, you need more fiber to break down those fructose and the sucrose in your body, because, our bodies want to process the glucose, but they have trouble with the fructose and sucrose. So when we go ahead and eat this fructose and sucrose anyway without having any fiber to slow down digestion, that's when it can really lead to type 2 diabetes. That's why keto is really good for preventing type 2 diabetes and for helping people on a diabetic diet. But since it's only 5% carbs, you really can't be having fruit juice or anything like that because your body's not getting enough of those carbs and those whole grains to really slow it down and process it. You can also try the cyclical ketogenic diet called CKD, and that one is periods of high carb refeeds. So like you do 5 keto days and then 2 high carb days. You can do targeted ketogenic, and that diet lets you add carbs around your workouts. So if you are into working out a lot, then maybe you could try that one out instead. Whereas if you are not working out a lot, you might want to stick with standard. There's also the high protein keto diet. So that one's similar to the standard one, but it just has more protein. So it just takes 15% from the fat intake and puts it into the protein instead. So it's still only 5% carbs, but you have 60% fat, 35% protein. Now the standard and high protein keto diets are the only ones that have really been studied in depth. Cyclical and targeted are more advanced methods that are primarily used by athletes, including bodybuilders. So those are really targeted towards people who are trying to build a lot of muscle mass. If that's not your goal and your goal is instead weight loss, then you might want to go with standard or the high protein one. Now, a lot of what we're going to talk about today mostly applies to standard because I feel like that one is the one that's going to apply with, really to most of you who may be listening. If you want to hear more about the cyclical or targeted ones, hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and I will be glad to have that discussion with you as well. Now, keto can help you lose weight. It can also lower those risk factors for diseases like Alzheimer's and diabetes we talked about earlier. And in general, research indicates that it's a lot better for you than, just a low-fat diet. Now, this diet is filling, and you can lose weight without really counting calories or tracking your food intake. So if you are, someone who is prone to body dysmorphia in regards to, anorexia or bulimia, things like that, then keto could be a little bit more helpful for you because you're not going to be having to count calories or track your food intake. So it can be a little bit healthier psychologically in that way. They did a study and found that people on keto lost 2.2 times more weight than people who were just on a calorie-restricted, low-fat diet. Keto can also lower your triglycerides, your HDL levels, and they did a study that found that people on the keto diet lost 3 times more weight than those on the diet recommended by Diabetes UK. So that was very efficient for a lot of people as well who are specifically looking to reduce their insulin issues. Now, keto also has, an increased protein intake, so that's going to give you several benefits, and having more ketones, lower blood sugar levels, and insulin sensitivity being improved can really help you out a lot. In fact, some studies have found that keto improved insulin sensitivity by 75%, and another study in which people had type 2 diabetes found that 1/3 of the participants were able to stop using all their diabetes medications. Now, that is one study. I am not at all suggesting that you just quit your medication. But if you are looking to move towards more of a holistic approach and away from a pharmaceutical approach, then keto could be really helpful for you in treating your diabetes according to these scientific studies. Now, as always, I recommend, seeing a large amount of studies replicating the same results so that we know that it is efficacious overall and that, there's replicability that makes sure that the studies are actually reliable. But so far, they have found that it is helping a lot. And this is something that you can work on with your doctor, and it's something that is quantifiably measurable. So your blood sugar levels, your insulin sensitivity are things that your doctor can measure for you. So if you want to try out keto, talk to your doctor about it for managing diabetes and prediabetes, see what they have to say, and if they give you the go-ahead on it, go ahead and try out that diet and see if it really helps you out. You can check in with your doctor periodically as well and see if your insulin sensitivity is improving as well as your blood sugar levels. So I thought that was very interesting. They found another study where 95% of the keto group were able to stop or reduce diabetes medication compared to 62% in the higher carb group. So I feel like part of that is just being mindful of our diets in general, but also, having the higher fat and protein amounts really did seem to make a statistically significant difference because 95% to 62% is still a whopping 33%. That's still, a third or 30% improvement over the higher carb group that keto has. So that's pretty cool. And it's an important benefit when you're trying to, kind of ameliorate the link between weight and type 2 diabetes. So if that's what you're looking to do, then keto may be right for you. It can also help you lower your risk of heart disease, cancer. They have done 4 or 5 studies that have shown that you can slow tumor growth with it. I don't know if that is necessarily all types of tumors, but they are treating it. They're using it to treat several different types of cancer and trying to slow the tumor growth. So if you are concerned about that, maybe talk to your doctor. Keto can reduce symptoms of Alzheimer's and slow its progression. It can also reduce seizures in epileptic children. It can help with Parkinson's, polycystic ovary syndrome, brain injuries, and acne. So if any of those are something that you are trying to address in your personal health, go ahead and talk to your doctor about it. Some of these research studies are not entirely conclusive. Like I said, we need more studies to get some more information from them, see if we can replicate it, and also, sort out whether, like caffeine, it's due to, caffeine versus decaf, or if it's more related to the antioxidants in the food. We're trying to control for all of those variables in these studies, and that's what multiple studies will help us do. So in the meantime, if we don't have a lot of research for it, you can keep an eye out for it on Google Scholar or by talking to your doctor about it periodically and see if, it moves along far enough that you feel that this is something you and your doctor would like to approach together as being one of your treatment recourses. All right, we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Whole30. As you guys know, I wear many hats daily. Unfortunately, creative design is not one of them. I've never really been happy with any of the logos I've created for pretty much anything I've run. It's really important to get the logo designs right though, but it's not always easy for me to nail down an idea. That's where Design Crowd comes in. They have a community of 750,000 professional designers around the world ready to help solve our creative problems. You just go to designcrowd.com, post a brief detailing the design you need, and then Design Crowd will invite its 750,000 designers to submit. Within hours, you can have your first design, and over the course of 2 days to a week, a typical project will receive up to 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you just pick the one that you think is best and approve the payment to that designer. Design Crowd takes a lot of the guesswork and the risk out of selecting a freelancer to create a logo for you. With Design Crowd, you only have to pay for the one that you like. And if you submit feedback over time, it will really help the designers get you a logo or a Facebook banner or a website content page to really pop the way that you have really envisioned. If you post a project and you don't find a design you like, that's okay. Design Crowd has a money-back guarantee. From logos to t-shirt designs to packaging designs, Design Crowd can source the art for you. Some people have even crowdsourced their tattoo designs on Design Crowd. The options are limitless for custom designs. Right now, you can go to designcrowd.com/health and wellness to learn more and save up to $150 when you start any project. That's a special VIP offer for our listeners, and you can also go to designcrowd.com. That's DESIGNCROWD.com/health and wellness with no spaces, or you can simply enter the discount code health and wellness, also no spaces, when posting a project on Design Crowd. Your custom design is waiting for you.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all of the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the ketogenic diet. Up next, we are going to talk about Whole30 to help you guys really sort out which diet might be for you. So for the Whole30, you get to eat real food. That is their number one rule. So meat, eggs, seafood, fruits and veggies, natural fats, herbs, spices, seasonings. You're going to go ahead and eat foods with a simple, recognizable list of ingredients or no ingredients at all, because they're going to be whole and unprocessed foods. That's why it's called Whole30. The 30 component means you're going to avoid different types of food for 30 days. First up, you are going to avoid consuming sugar that is added, whether that is real or artificial. So no added maple syrup, honey, agave, coconut sugar, date syrup, stevia, Splenda, any of those. You want to make sure that if it is an added sugar in the list, you don't eat it. You do not consume alcohol in any form, even for cooking. Like literally, ideally, no tobacco products either. That one is less of a firm rule, but they prefer that you don't have tobacco products either. Do not eat grains. So in this case, it's going to be kind of similar to keto, where you're trying to lower your carb intake. But specifically, this one's going to be limited to no wheat, no rye, barley, oats, corn, rice, millet, bulgur even. Well, that's sad. That's one of my favorites. No sorghum, no sprouted grains, and none of those gluten-free pseudo cereals like amaranth, buckwheat, or quinoa. That is a big bummer, but it's just for 30 days, and it includes all the different ways that we add wheat, corn, or rice into our foods. So that means even bran, starch, germ, etc. should not be eaten on the Whole30 diet for those 30 days. So this is going to be really intensive on reading labels. You're also not allowed to eat legumes on this one, so no beans, black, red, pinto, navy, white, fava, none of those. No peas, no chickpeas or lentils, no peanuts or peanut butter. Also no form of soy at all. So no edamame, miso, tofu, even soy sauce. That's out. You are also not allowed to eat dairy. So that's cow, goat, sheep, any of those, and any derivatives of that. So no kefir, yogurt, or sour cream, etc. If you tend to get your probiotics from yogurt, you're going to have to find a different source during your Whole30 diet. For the MSG, sulfites, and carrageenan, you're not allowed to have those in any form on the label. You've got to toss that out for Whole30. And by toss out, I don't mean like actually throw it away. Just put it in the back of the pantry till your Whole30 diet is over with. You are not to consume baked goods either, because you're not supposed to have any of those grains. No junk food, and no treats with approved ingredients. So you're really trying to avoid anything that's not a whole food. Even if the ingredients are technically complying with Whole30, it's missing the point. You're trying to really reset your habits with the Whole30 diet. So those sweet treats are what kind of got you into the health and craving trouble in the first place. And a pancake is still a pancake, even if you make it with other types of flour. They also don't want you to step on the scale or take any body measurements for 30 days. I am super pro no scales and no body measurements. When I was growing up, my mom made a point to not have any scales in our house because she did not want us to, really fixate on our weight. It's more about, how we felt and about the foods that we were putting into our bodies and the exercise we were getting, even if that exercise was just, going out in the yard and gardening or landscaping or, we had goats and stuff because we were 4-H kids. So walking the goats around and training them for the agricultural shows, just like you would do like with dogs for a dog show. That counted as exercise as well. So we would get our exercise and take care of our bodies that way rather than doing body measurements. So if you're like me and you don't really use scales or take body measurements, then this will be a piece of cake for you. If you like to see those results as you go ahead and hide that scale and your tape measure somewhere you're not going to be inclined to reach for it. Shove it way back under the bed. Hide it in the box with the Christmas lights, whatever you need to do to stay away from that. Whole30 is not just about weight loss. And if you're focusing a lot on how your body looks, then it's going to really result in you overlooking all of the other lifelong benefits the plan really intends to offer. So we don't want to analyze our body fat, no weighing ourselves or measuring ourselves during the 30-day elimination period. Although they do allow you to take photos and or measurements on days 0 and days 31. So you can take before and after pictures, but you cannot take any pictures or measurements or, of weight or of, circumference while you are on the Whole30. Now, they do have some specific foods that fall under this rule, like you're not allowed to have ice cream, cupcakes, no alternative flour, pizza crust, or pastas, all the things that we crave, because Whole30 is largely about helping us not crave processed foods. You can't have commercially prepared chips, not potato or tortilla or plantain, no French fries, because remember, we're trying to limit those carbs. And that list of off-limit foods applies to everyone, even folks who, don't crave pancakes. I don't crave pancakes. They are not even my top 2 for breakfast things. I would eat French toast and then waffles and then I guess pancakes. You know what? Crepes and then pancakes. I'm just not a pancake person. But if I did Whole30, that would still apply to me, even if I don't crave it. You want to make sure that you exclude foods that make you feel out of control, including like almond butter. There is a book on the Whole30, so you can read the entire thing. It's like 100 pages or more, which is really interesting. So if you like to read a lot and research your diets, Whole30 might be really friendly for you. Now, there are some foods that are exceptions to the rule and are allowed during your Whole30 diet. You can have ghee/clarified butter. So that is the only source of dairy allowed during Whole30. You can't have plain old butter because you might be sensitive to the milk proteins found in non-clarified butter, and you just don't know it yet. So the idea of Whole30 is also to peel back what we are eating to see if maybe, some milk sensitivity or sensitivity to gluten and other types of food may also be causing us to feel drained or fatigued a lot. You can have some fruit juice. Some products or recipes will include fruit juice as a standalone ingredient or as a natural sweetener. So that is okay for the purposes of Whole30. As they say, they have to draw the line somewhere. You can have certain legumes. So you could have sugar snap peas, my favorite, green beans, another one of my favorites, and also snow peas. Those are technically legumes, but they're more pod-based than bean. So think about those, and they are technically in pods, although regular peas are not allowed. And green plant matter is generally pretty good for you on the Whole30 list. You can have vinegar and botanical extracts. So most vinegars, like red wine, balsamic, apple cider, and rice vinegar, and alcohol-based botanical extracts like vanilla, almond, or lavender are allowed during Whole30. You just have to stay away from the malt-based vinegars and extracts, and they're generally labeled that way because they contain gluten. That's why you have to avoid those. Now, coconut aminos are allowed. That means all brands of them, and it's a brewed and naturally fermented soy sauce substitute. If you see the words coconut nectar or coconut syrup in the ingredient list, you can still have coconut aminos. I've not personally branched down that road, but if that is something you are interested in, that is one of the exceptions. You can have salt. All iodized table salt contains sugar. Sugar is chemically essential to keep the potassium iodide in your body from oxidizing and being lost. So because all restaurants and prepackaged foods contain salt, salt is an exception to the no added sugar rule. It's just very difficult to avoid that in general. So it has a little bit of dextrose in it, but that's okay for the Whole30. Now, during the Whole30, you're really just trying to focus on making good food choices. So no weighing, no measuring, no counting or restricting calories or purchasing everything in organic form. You don't have to worry about that. Just stick to the Whole30 rules for 30 straight days. No cheat days, no special occasions either. It's just for 30 days. So this isn't meant to make you feel miserable. The requirement for it is just really a reset for your diet. So kind of like how we talked in our last segment about having a caffeine reset or caffeine tolerance reset, Whole30 is really resetting you. And at its heart, it's just an elimination diet. So they've been doing elimination diets really since the 1920s. And a lot of doctors say that that is the most helpful way to find out if you have a food sensitivity. But you have to do it by the book in order to see it. It's like how you do a fasting blood sugar for your doctor. You can't do a fasting blood sugar and go, okay, yeah, I fasted on everything except for fruit juice. I had some orange juice this morning. That's not how it works. So we have to make sure that we follow it and completely eliminate the problematic foods listed on the Whole30 for that full 30 days. You can't have one bite of pizza or one spoonful of ice cream. Don't be sipping on your partner's beer within the Whole30 period. Then if you do, you have to start over at day 1 again. So it's not worth it in the long run. Make sure that you go ahead and you stick to it so you don't have to keep starting over and tacking more days onto your Whole30 diet. Commit to the full program, 100% for the full 30 days to really see the differences and see if you can really reset your body's cravings for all of these carbs and artificial sugars, really, that we tend to add into our food. It's kind of tough love, but it's not so hard. It's just a little bit of self-restraint, some willpower for that 30 days. For me, keeping in mind, hey, this is just 30 days is really easy to continue. You could even get a calendar out and write down, where day 1 is going to be and where day 30 is going to be and mark it off. If it's more helpful for you, you can start in a month that has 30 days, and that way you can just follow it along from day 1 onward. Or if that doesn't matter to you, you can start it on the 10th, start it on the 16th. It doesn't matter as long as it is for 30 days. Make sure that you don't try to eat anything you don't want to eat. Now, there are restrictions as to what you can eat on Whole30, but you don't have to eat or drink anything. You can just say, no thank you. If someone wants you to eat cake because it's like a birthday party or something, you can just say, no thanks. It's okay to say no. You do not have to drink champagne during a toast at a wedding or anything. It's nobody's business but yours as to why you are not doing that. Your body, your choice for what goes into it. Now, this will require a little bit of effort for the Whole30. You have to grocery shop and meal plan a little bit, and then dining out can be a little bit, difficult because you need to know exactly what's in your food while you're going. But they have a lot of advice and resources in the Whole30 book if you want to go ahead and follow that. But you can do it. It's only 30 days. Keep that in mind, and I believe in you. So if you want to try the Whole30, go ahead and commit to that whole 30 days. And you can go to Whole30.com and sign up for their starter kit if you'd like. One of my buddies did the Whole30 and he really enjoyed it. He does it every now and then just as a reset or, kind of like a caffeine detox, but for different types of cravings. It's his favorite one, and he lost quite a bit of weight on it as well, and that was his goal. So if this is one of your goals, I encourage you to try out the Whole30. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk paleo. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Segment, we were talking about the Whole30 diet, and now we're going to talk a little bit about paleo. When we say paleo, really what they mean is a Paleolithic diet. So foods that might have been eaten during the Paleolithic era, which they are dating from 2.5 million to 10,000 years ago. That means anything that you could really get from hunting and gathering for the most part. You can have lean meats, fish, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds. If you could hunt it down or if you could pick it from the ground or a tree, then you can typically have that in paleo. They do limit foods that became common when farming really became more of our way of subsistence about 10,000 years ago. So when we moved from hunting and gathering to more agriculture, they limit those. So they don't want you to have dairy products or legumes or grains. So in that way, it's not really that different from the Whole30. But they also call the paleo diet the Stone Age diet, the hunter-gatherer diet, or the caveman diet. So if you haven't heard of it, it's called paleo. You might have heard of it by a different name. The goal for it is to go back to a way of eating that's more similar to what early humans ate. And the reasoning that they list behind it is that the human body is genetically mismatched to the modern diet that emerged with farming practices. They call this the discordance hypothesis. So farming changed a lot of what we were able to eat and what our ancestors were able to process, and it established dairy, grains, and legumes as additional staples in the human diet instead of just being, mostly meat and vegetables and fruits that could be picked. That really rapid change in the diet, according to this discordance hypothesis, kind of outpaced the body's ability to adapt. And a lot of folks believe that mismatch is a contributing factor to, the prevalence of obesity today, diabetes, and heart disease. Now, I have a lot of feelings about paleo. I'm not a huge fan of it. As an anthropologist, things happen, we evolve, we move forward, and we adapt. And I don't necessarily love paleo, but just because it's not for me does not mean it's not for you. You are welcome to try this and see what you think. So you might want to follow paleo if you're trying to lose weight or you want to maintain your weight, or if you want help with planning meals. So just like Whole30, there are also a lot of planned paleo meals. The recommendations for what to eat varies a lot among commercial paleo diets. Some diet plans are stricter than others, very similar to how there's like 4 different types of keto diets. But in general, if you're looking to try paleo, you can eat fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, lean meats. So particularly they want you to go for grass-fed animals or wild game. So if you have a butcher shop near you that specializes in wild game, or some folks who hunt a lot, you can go out and talk to them about that and maybe go halvesies on a deer or something, especially if you have one of those floor freezers. That's really big where I'm from, where everyone will go hunting or they'll slaughter a hog or a pig or something and split it up with the neighbors and keep them in floor freezers for the next year. So you can try that out if you'd like. You can also have fish, especially the ones that have a lot of omega-3 fatty acids like salmon, my personal favorite, mackerel, not so much my favorite, but it's a pretty fishy fish. But if that's what you're into, go for it. It has a lot of omega-3 fatty acids. And also albacore tuna. You can have oils from fruits and nuts, so olive oil or walnut oil, totally fine. If you want to know more about which type of oils to use and where they come from, go ahead and check out our previous episode on labels for oils, eggs, and dairy. Now that we know what we can eat with the paleo diet, what do we have to avoid? No grains, so no wheat, oats, or barley. You can't have oatmeal during this diet. You cannot have beans, lentils, peanuts, or peas, so any type of legumes really. You cannot have dairy products, so that's part of agriculture. You couldn't hunt or gather milk. You had to obtain that from a domesticated cow. I don't know if you guys have ever tried to milk a cow. I have. And if you don't have a happy cow, it's not going to go very well for you. It's going to kick you, really, and that hurts. One of them broke my grandmother's arm when she was milking them as a kid. So, you want to make sure you have domesticated cows. You can't just run up on a cow and take milk from it. You really need to put like a bucket of food in front of it, and then it'll chill out. But, again, domesticated. So no dairy, because we can't have anything from domesticated animals. You can still wear wool, though. That's okay. It's about what goes in our bodies, not on our bodies. You cannot have refined sugar, no salt, no potatoes, and no highly processed foods in general. So if you were going to eat Whole30, you could have like broiled salmon and cantaloupe for breakfast is one of their recommendations. I don't know how you feel about having salmon and cantaloupe for breakfast. If that doesn't sound strange to you, go for it. If you're comfortable with eating that, go for it. If for lunch, you could have broiled, most of these are broiled or roasted, broiled lean pork loin and a salad. So romaine, really anytime we're going for a salad, we want to have really solid, nutritional salad. Get that iceberg lettuce out of here. It's not really giving you any nutrition. It's just there for the most part. So go for like romaines, carrots, cucumbers, tomatoes, walnuts, lemon juice dressing. That's totally fine. You can have a lean beef sirloin tip roast, broccoli that's steamed. Remember, not adding butter or anything to that. We can have a salad, mixed greens. Mixed greens are my favorite, to be honest, or spinach. I like to have a lot of salads with spinach and arugula and all that jazz. You can have avocado, so that's the good news. You can also have onions and almonds. You can have strawberries for dessert. A lot of your desserts on paleo are going to be fruit-based. And then, for snacks, you can have carrot sticks, celery sticks, and orange. I would go for the orange here, personally. But if you are more into veggies, then you do have a couple of options there. You can also have some nuts as a snack, or some types of seeds. So if you were more into savory foods, that is also an option, or if you really want some good crunch with your snacks. You really want to drink a lot of water on paleo, and it's really focused on being physically active every day. So remember, we want to get that 30 to 60 minutes of exercise each day of cardio. So going for a walk or, a little jog, whether that's on the elliptical or the treadmill, or you're out in the woods, or you want to do, swimming, because again, it's about cardio and less about, weightlifting. So it's okay that you are buoyant and therefore not putting a lot of weight on your muscles and bones at that point. So why would you do paleo? There have been a number of randomized clinical trials. So when we say randomized, we want to make sure that means that people aren't really aware of what all's going on, and there is no selection that allows them to game the system. The researchers can't game the system to get the results that they want. So they did randomized clinical trials and randomly sorted folks into different diet plans, and then compared the paleo diet to other eating plans like the Mediterranean diet or the diabetes diet that's recommended in the UK. And overall, they found that paleo may provide some benefits when compared with diets of fruits, vegetables, lean meats, whole grains, legumes, low-fat dairy products. So what are these benefits? More weight loss is what they found, improved glucose tolerance, blood pressure control, lower triglycerides, and appetite management. Now, they also found that longer trials with large groups of people randomly assigned to those different diets are needed to understand long-term health benefits and possible risk of paleo diets. These were short-term studies, and really we need longitudinal studies. Longitudinal studies means over a long period of time, so years, hopefully, to see how this is really affecting people in the long term, in order to really determine, is this doing exactly what it says, and is it doing that with everyone or just with this group? So these have just been short term so far, so we need to know a little bit more to really say that paleo definitely does these things that they suspect it does. Now, there are some questions and concerns about the paleo diet. That includes both the food selection and the underlying hypothesis. The dietary concerns are that while paleo has a lot of vegetables, fruits, and nuts in it, it has an absence of whole grains and legumes. So we need those for fiber in order to help us with our insulin sensitivity. We need the fiber to slow down our digestive system so we can absorb the fructose that is naturally in fruits, that fruit sugar. You also don't have any dairy products. We get a lot of our protein and our calcium from dairy. Now, what that means is that you're just going to have to find another source of that if you are going to be doing the paleo diet. Dairy is not the only place to get protein or calcium, but we do need to be attentive to that, particularly if we are middle-aged or older, or if we are female, because we are more prone to osteoporosis at that point. So keep that in mind when you're considering this diet. Again, talk to your doctor if you have any concerns about it. But a lot of these foods are healthy and more affordable and accessible than the foods that paleo is recommending, like grass-fed animals and nuts and stuff. So a paleo diet might be really expensive, particularly if socioeconomic status and affordability is one of your key variables in picking which diet is right for you. So you might be more inclined to do Whole30 or keto instead of paleo. Now, questions about the paleo diet hypothesis. Some researchers have argued that the underlying hypothesis is kind of oversimplifying the story of how humans adapted to dietary changes. And I agree with them. So the arguments for a more complex understanding of human nutritional evolution includes variations in diet based on geography, climate, and food availability. So it's not just what is good for your body, but really what would literally have been available at the time to shape those nutritional needs and their adaptation and evolution. A lot of archaeological research has also demonstrated that early human diets may have included wild grains as many as 30,000 years ago. So way before the introduction of farming, and actually occurring within that window that the Paleolithic diet is claiming to be. So remember, it's from 2 million years ago to 10,000 years ago. And that means that 30,000 year ago window means that wild grains were already in the Paleolithic diet, the diet of Paleolithic people, not the fad diet. Genetic research has also shown that there have been a lot of evolutionary changes that have continued after the Paleolithic era. So that means diet-related changes as well, like increases in the amount of genes related to breaking down dietary starches. So the paleo diet is claiming that a lot of these changes occurred in the Paleolithic era, and so that is why we should go ahead and follow the Paleolithic diet. But let's face it, our bodies are very different as anatomically modern humans from our anthropological ancestors. That's okay. Things change, people change, species change, and it takes a long time for that to happen and for evolution to occur, but we do have these short-term adaptations. A lot of folks today don't have wisdom teeth at this point. I don't know if you guys know that, but one of my friends from anthropology undergrad did not ever develop wisdom teeth. We are trending to have smaller jaws at this point. It's called a secular trend because it's a change in, over time that is gradually happening. And so she doesn't have wisdom teeth. Mine were very small and impacted because my wisdom teeth and my jaw are just smaller in general. That's okay. Human jaws used to be very large in our ancestors, but they have over time gotten smaller and smaller. So a lot of people's, dentition have changed. A lot of our genes have changed at this point to make us able to break down dietary starches, and that means able to eat more of these foods that were entering into our diet around the time of agriculture. So it's okay to not do the paleo diet. I'm not a huge fan, but I do recognize that a lot of folks might be into it. So paleo has been indicated to perhaps help you lose weight or maintain your weight, but there are no long-term clinical studies about the benefits and potential risks. You are likely to be able to get the same health benefits by just getting enough exercise and eating a balanced, healthy diet that has a lot of fruits and vegetables. But remember, if you're eating a lot of fruits or fruit juices, you also need to be really getting whole grains to slow down your digestion and help you with your insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity. Otherwise, you could develop type 2 diabetes. So, in my opinion, as a biological anthropologist, I would not recommend the paleo diet. No offense to the paleo folks, but, I would be more inclined to go for Whole30 or ketosis in that way. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the DASH diet to help lower blood pressure.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
In our last segment, we were talking about the paleo diet. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the DASH diet. So the DASH diet stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, and it's very much focused on lowering your blood pressure. So if blood pressure concerns are one of your primary health concerns, the DASH diet may very well be for you. It focuses on getting you the right portion sizes and a good variety of foods and nutrients. It can help improve your health and lower blood pressure overall. So it's really a lifelong approach. The Whole30 is a temporary diet, so it's only 30 days, whereas DASH is something that you're going to be doing long term. And it's really designed to prevent high blood pressure or to treat it. Now, it was also developed to lower blood pressure without medication, and the research was sponsored by the National Institute of Health. Some of my professors have received funding from the National Institute of Health as well. So, that's what they're there for. They give you some money to help you study what is going to help people become healthier. The DASH diet encourages you to, remove some of the sodium that's in your diet, because sodium salt can lead to high blood pressure, and to also eat a variety of foods that can help lower your blood pressure. So potassium, calcium, and magnesium are really healthy there. If you follow the DASH diet, it can go ahead and reduce your blood pressure by just a few weeks. That's really awesome. It's a pretty immediate type of result. Over time, the top number of your blood pressure, your systolic, could drop by 8 to 14 points. So that can make a really big difference in any of your potential health risks if you're prone to heart disease. Since it is a healthy way of eating, DASH also offers health benefits besides just lowering blood pressure. It's in some good dietary recommendations for preventing osteoporosis, cancer, heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. So it can be really beneficial for you for a wide variety of health concerns. Your sodium levels are the primary issue with the DASH diet, and it's really going to encourage you to eat more fruits, veggies, and low-fat dairy foods. Moderate amounts of whole grains, fish, poultry, and nuts are still totally fine though. In order to follow the DASH diet, you can go ahead and choose which version meets your health needs. So just like keto, this has a couple different versions. The standard DASH diet lets you have up to 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day, and the lower sodium DASH diet lets you have up to 1,500 milligrams per day. So both versions are really focusing on reducing the amount of sodium in your diet compared with what you might get in a typical American diet, and that means up to about 3,400 milligrams of sodium per day or more. I've been reading a lot of health labels over the last few years, and it's kind of horrifying at what all has sodium in it. You might not think that something would have that in there, but a lot of sodas have sodium in them, and it's a little crazy what all is going to be included. So this is going to be another one where you're wanting to read a lot of the backs of the labels. So check that out. And really, you're not keeping track of your calories with this. It's mostly keeping track of your sodium intake and your servings that you're receiving. The standard DASH diet does meet the recommendation from the Dietary Guidelines for Americans to keep daily sodium intake at under 2,300 milligrams per day, whereas the American Heart Association is recommending the lower sodium DASH diet, so only up to 1,500 milligrams per day as the upper limit for all adults. Now, if you aren't sure which sodium level is right for you, go ahead and have a conversation with your doctor about it. See what your risks are for heart disease and diabetes, stroke, all that jazz, and they can really help you determine which one is best for you. So with the DASH diet, what can you eat? Both versions, you can have a lot of whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and low-fat dairy products. It's totally fine. The DASH diet also lets you have some fish, poultry, legumes. So this is really the first diet we've discussed today that does allow quite a bit of legumes. You can have small amounts of nuts and seeds a few times per week. So it's very different from paleo in that regard. You can still have red meat though, and you can have sweets and fats, but those should all be in small amounts because the DASH diet has low amounts of saturated fat, trans fat, and total fat. So unlike the first one we discussed, the keto diet, you're not going to have a lot of fat in this. Remember, keto is 60 to 75% of your macros are going into fat, whereas the DASH diet, you just get a little bit. So what are your recommended servings based on the food groups for the DASH diet? This is based on a 2,000 calorie a day DASH diet. So 2,000 calories is about average for the recommended daily allowance. For this, you can have about 6 to 8 servings of grain per day. That means, one slice of whole wheat bread is 1 serving. So if you have a sandwich, that's 2 servings, unless it's a club sandwich, and then it's 3. You can have 1 ounce of dry cereal, probably Cheerios at that point. I don't know anyone except Marie who eats dry shredded wheat, but feel free to correct me in the comments. You can also have half a cup of cooked cereal or rice or pasta. So they really want you to focus on whole grains because those have more fiber and thereby also nutrients than refined grains do. So they do want you to use brown rice instead of white rice, or whole wheat or veggie-based pasta instead of regular pasta. You're going to look for things that say 100% whole grain or 100% whole wheat if you're going to be following the DASH diet. Grains are naturally low in fat, so that is the good news. You can keep them that way by not adding things to them like butter, cream, or cheese sauces. Now that makes me very sad because I do love to have, oatmeal with butter, and I like to put, cheese and butter in my grits, also sausage. It's not super healthy, but, that's the Southern diet for you. Grits are a sometimes food for me. For your vegetables, you can have most types of vegetables for it. Greens, sweet potatoes, broccoli, carrots, tomatoes. Mostly you're looking for vegetables that are going to be full of fiber, vitamins, and minerals, particularly potassium and magnesium. So 1 serving of veggies means like 1 cup of raw leafy green vegetables or half a cup of cut up or, raw cooked vegetables. It can be either one. You can have them raw, you can have it cooked. Broccoli is broccoli in this manner. So it's okay to go ahead and boil it or steam it. But again, we don't want to be adding lots of butter or cheese to it. So no broccoli and cheese, just broccoli. You don't want to think of vegetables as just side dishes. A lot of us do tend to think of it that way. So if you think of a balanced meal, it's like, okay, I'm going to have a little bit of whole grains, like some bulgur or quinoa here, or some brown rice, and then I'm going to have, 1 green vegetable like broccoli, and I'm going to have meat. And meat's going to be my entree. When I cook with my ex, we often will do double greens for stuff. Sometimes we don't even put a grain in there. If it's like a big dinner thing, we'll eat our grains throughout the days in salad or in our cereal. But you can go ahead and, eat ratatouille. Ratatouille is just veggies, and it can be really good. You can also do like an eggplant parmesan. I like that, even though I'm not really big into like a vegan diet. We do eat a lot of, really a plant-based diet. We eat a lot of vegetables and plants and everything. So that makes it a little bit easier for us. But with the Whole30 and with, this diet right here of being focused on lowering the amount of fats, you can't really have a lot of cheese in it. So maybe don't do the eggplant parmesan. But in general, that's how I kind of tend to eat my diet and nutrition, and it helps me a lot personally. For your fruits, you need a little bit of prep for them to be a really healthy part of your meal or snack. They do have a lot of fiber in them though, because you're eating whole fruits. Remember, we want to avoid juice for the most part. But they also have potassium and magnesium, and they're typically pretty low in fat unless they're coconuts or, also avocados a little bit. So for an example of that is 1 medium fruit. That always gets me, like, what is a medium fruit? But, think about different types of apples. So Honey Crisps tend to be rather large, and Red Delicious tend to be kind of small. So are Granny Smiths. So something in between one of those, I think. If we're thinking of this as a binary opposition or a dichotomy of apple sizes, something that is larger than a Red Delicious, smaller than a Honey Crisp is going to be a medium fruit. Similarly, something between a mandarin or tangerine and one of those navel oranges. So, maybe like a blood orange. Those are my favorite anyway. They're a lot of fun. You can have half a cup of fresh, frozen, or canned fruit, or 4 ounces of juice. If you do choose canned fruit or juice, make sure there's no sugar added to it. We want to make sure that it's just straight up juice, like pressed juice, or make it yourself if you'd like. For dairy, 2 to 3 servings a day. So that means like 1 cup of skim milk or 1% milk, 1 cup of low-fat yogurt, or 1.5 ounces of part skim cheese. If you're looking at the part skim cheese, mozzarella, that's where we're going. We want to make sure that we avoid regular and even fat-free cheeses because they tend to have higher levels of sodium because they're trying to make up for, some of the fat that is not in it because it's fat-free by giving it more flavor with sodium rather than with the fat where the tastiness tends to come from. So with lean meat, poultry, and fish, you can have 6 1-ounce servings or fewer per day. So a 4-ounce serving is about the size of a deck of cards. So if you're thinking about that, it's like 1 regular sized pork chop from the grocery store is 4 ounces. And then if you conceptualize that for 6 ounces, that means like 1.5 pork chops. That's what it wants you to have throughout the entire day. So maybe have a pork chop as your meat serving at dinner, and for lunch, you can have like half of a chicken breast cut up and put into a nice mixed green salad with, some walnuts and stuff. Meat can be a really good source of your protein, your B vitamins, iron, and zinc. So if you are cutting down on your meat, make sure that you are getting iron and stuff from those dark leafy greens, and make sure that you're not missing out on some of the good stuff, some of those really good and important vitamins and nutrients. They want you to primarily pick lean meat and poultry and fish, and no more than 6 1-ounce servings per day. It sounds crazy to think of it as 6 1-ounce servings per day, but conceptualize it any way that helps you. So half of a deck of cards is 2 ounces. So that means you can have, essentially like, 1, 2, 3, 3 halves of a pork chop, 1.5 pork chops, or, a chicken breast, depending on how large it is per day, and go from there. They want you to eat salmon, herring, and tuna. Those are our heart-healthy fish. And you can also have, 1 serving of eggs. So that means 1 egg or 1 ounce of cooked meat, poultry, or fish. For the fish and the poultry and meat, they want you to trim away the skin and fat and then bake it, broil it, grill it, or roast it instead of frying it in fat like butter or oils. Now, the herring, salmon, and tuna are really high in omega-3 fatty acids, so that's really good for your heart. We talked about that a little bit more in a previous podcast. Omega-6s, not the best. Omega-3s, go for it. For nuts, seeds, and legumes, you can have 4 to 5 servings of those per week. So everything else up to now has been per day, but for nuts, seeds, and legumes, they only want you to have a couple per week. So as a snack, like 5 days a week while you're at work, you can have a little bit of, some almonds, some sunflower seeds, stuff like that. But also they're counting kidney beans, peas, lentils, and other foods in that family. Those are good sources of magnesium, protein, and potassium, and have a lot of fiber and phytochemicals in them. Remember, those phytochemicals can help you, protect your body against cancer and cardiovascular disease. Some of them are very similar in activity to antioxidants. So go for it. You have small serving sizes of these because, these foods are higher in calories. Almonds and peanuts tend to have a lot of calories in them for their size. So 1 serving of nuts is going to be just 1/3 of a cup. Or for seeds and nut butter, 2 tablespoons. And, 1/2 cup of cooked beans or peas. So if you are going to be eating a peanut butter sandwich, depending on how much peanut butter you put on there, 2 tablespoons is not a lot. So if you have 1 peanut butter sandwich, that's pretty much your nuts for the week. Now, nuts do get a bad rap because of their fat content, but they have healthy fats in them. Remember in our episode about fats and oils, we talked about the differences between saturated fat versus mono and polyunsaturated fats. In the case of nuts, a lot of them is just monounsaturated fat and omega-3 fatty acids. So that's really good for you. But they do have a lot of calories in them. So, all things in moderation. You can put them in stir fries though. My friend Marie likes to put a lot of sunflower seeds in her salads. That's her go-to. It adds a nice crunch overall that's different from the crunch of the vegetables, and it can be a lot of fun. For fats and oils, you can have 2 to 3 servings per day on the DASH diet. So fat does help your body absorb those vitamins. We've talked about that before, and it's going to boost your immune system. But if you have too much, it can elevate your risk for obesity, diabetes, heart disease. We want to make sure that we are keeping that total fat to less than 30% of our daily calories coming from fat. So for our macros, that's what we're looking at. The focus is going to be on monounsaturated fats. So check the labels, see what kind of fat is on the back of it, look at the total fat, and look for monounsaturated fats. Remember, trans fat is bad, saturated fats in the middle, and then mono and polyunsaturated fats are the ones that we are really going for. An example of a serving for this would include 1 teaspoon of soft margarine or 1 tablespoon of mayonnaise or 2 tablespoons of salad dressing. So it's pretty free for you for this one. So 2 to 3 servings per day seems pretty chill. If you're going to do a whole tablespoon of mayonnaise, you could do that if you're making like a tuna sandwich and mix that in with the tuna. So you're having that heart-healthy protein with the omega-3 fatty acids and a little bit of that mayo to help you really process those vitamins and minerals. It's a great way to do it. And if you have that 1 tablespoon of mayo in your tuna salad sandwich, you can have 2 to 3 servings of these fats and oils per day. So you can use the other 2 tablespoons on a salad dressing. Saturated fat and trans fat are the main types of fat that are going to cause or increase your risk of getting coronary artery disease. So since DASH is kind of a heart-healthy diet, that's why it's going to limit a lot of the saturated fats, and you're focusing on poly and mono unsaturated. For sweets, you can only have 5 servings or fewer per week, not just per day. 1 serving of sweets is like 1 tablespoon of sugar, jelly, or jam, half a cup of sorbet, or 1 cup of lemonade. Although I think that really depends on who makes your lemonade and how much sugar you tend to put in it. Now, when you eat sweets, try to pick the ones that are fat-free or low-fat, like sorbets or fruit ices or jelly beans, hard candy, graham crackers, stuff like that. Artificial sweeteners can help you, feel like you are getting sugar while sparing the sugar, but you've got to use them sensibly. And remember that long-term, from our sugar episode, that artificial sugars are not great for you because they cannot fully sate that craving. They don't quite fit the puzzle pieces of the receptors versus, these sugar molecules or these artificial sweetener molecules don't quite fit together the same way. So it cannot complete that full pathway and make you feel like you really got enough sugar. So in the long term, artificial sweeteners are going to make you crave more sugar in the long term. In the short term, you might see some solid dietary changes and some weight loss, but if you do it for more than 3 months, it can cause a lot of problems with craving that, according to those studies. For more info on that, check out our episode about sugar. Now, alcohol can also increase your blood pressure, and, caffeine, not much of a problem with the DASH diet. The influence of caffeine on blood pressure is kind of still unclear, as we talked about in our last episode, but caffeine can cause your blood pressure to rise, at least temporarily. So we want to make sure we're not having a lot of caffeine while we're on the DASH diet because we're focusing on our heart health. So we want to make sure we're not drinking more than that 400 milligrams of caffeine per day. And if you're prone to heart disease, no more than 200 milligrams per day. That means 200 milligrams of caffeine is going to be about 2 8-ounce cups of coffee. 400, 4 8-ounce cups of coffee. And remember that energy drinks are about 320 milligrams of caffeine per energy drink, per 32-ounce drink. That's quite a bit. So be careful, be mindful rather of that, and keep that in mind when you are looking for a heart-healthy diet. For alcohol, they recommend no more than 2 drinks a day for men and 1 or less for women. For cutting back on sodium, just, use a lot of sodium-free spices. I do that a lot with my cooking. I like to put a lot of cayenne pepper in there, all kinds of pepper, to be honest. I have oak smoked pepper and just plain ground pepper, in a pepper grinder, and some multicolored pepper, just lots of different flavor profiles. Paprika is a big one I use, cumin, coriander, and cardamom, depending on what I'm making. If I'm doing a pork chop, I'm going to put cardamom and coriander in there, a little bit of thyme, and go ahead and cook that in the pan. And that makes the pork chops or chicken, whatever I'm cooking, usually pork chops though, really delicious without adding any sodium to it. So there are ways to do it. We just have to reach for all of our different spices and flavorings. If you have canned foods that you're eating, you can rinse them to remove some of the sodium from them. So green beans in a can tend to be pretty high in sodium. Go ahead and just rinse them off, and that'll help get rid of some of that. I've also seen that you can add a potato into something that is over-salted. My grandmother used to do that to help draw some of the sodium into the potato and make the food less salty if it's accidentally over-seasoned. So you might want to try that as well. Rinse those canned foods, then stick that half of a potato that's been peeled into the food while you're heating it up on the stove and see if you can draw some of that sodium out. You can also just buy foods that are labeled with no salt added, sodium-free, low sodium, or very low sodium. And then don't add any salt if you're cooking rice, pasta, or hot cereals. This is going to perhaps be a little bit shocking, but 1 teaspoon of table salt has 2,325 milligrams of sodium in it. That's a lot considering that the DASH diet wants you to have 2,300 milligrams or under per day. So that means less than 1 teaspoon of table salt for the entire day. And if you are following the other recommendation, it's going to be under 1,500. So even 1 teaspoon of table salt per day at that point is going to be too much for you. So low-fat soups Canned vegetables, ready-to-eat cereals, deli meats can often have a lot of sodium in them, even though we otherwise consider them to be healthy. So if you're going for a heart-healthy diet, go ahead and try the DASH diet maybe. Talk to your doctor about it. You're going to need to maybe gradually cut back on your table salt to reach your sodium goal. Otherwise, you're going to feel like your food is super bland. But it's very similar to like the caffeine tolerance detox, where you're just gradually going to be peeling that back until your palate changes a little bit. I did the same thing with, going down from Dr. Pepper to Cokes to Sprites to juice, and now I just primarily drink water. I kind of weaned myself off of it so that my palate had time to adjust. That makes it a lot easier. I'm doing that with my coffee right now. I've probably cut the caramel amount in my caramel macchiatos down by half, and I make the caramel myself at this point, so I know exactly what's in it. Now, it's mostly sucrose. Now, that's not great, but it is, better than any artificial sweeteners that were in it, and definitely better than the Caro syrup and stuff that was added on the ingredients label in the bottle that I was buying before. So doing that gradually is going to help you out a lot. You're going to forgive yourself if you have a slip up and reward yourself for successes. So go for non-food treats. Rent a movie, chill with a friend, go ahead and get you a new book, even though you have 45 other books on your bookshelf that you haven't read yet, and you keep going to the bookstore. You and me both. So get you something that is non-food related for a reward. And then add some physical activity in there. Any diet is going to be the most effective when you pair it with physical activity. So go ahead and even, just walk your dog for 15 minutes. Something like that. You can do 15 minutes in the morning and 15 at night. Boom. Now you've gotten 30 minutes of exercise per day. It's okay to wean yourself off of something and also work your way up to stuff. We're just being mindful, and we're not going to beat ourselves up about it. We're just going to work hard. If you also need support and you have trouble sticking to your diet, talk to a doctor or a dietitian about it. They can give you some really helpful tips for sticking to your diet. Also, get a buddy who may also be facing these similar problems and stick to the diet together. We're going to go on another break. When we come back, we're going to talk about gluten-free diet.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We talked at length about the heart-healthy diet, referred to as the DASH diet. Now we are going to talk about the gluten-free diet. I know a lot of folks who follow a gluten-free diet because they are sensitive to gluten or they have celiac disease and they need to not have as much gluten in their diet. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means at this point. Gluten is a protein, believe it or not, and it is found in most grains. The gluten that is in grains like barley, wheat, rye, and then there's something called triticale, which is a cross between wheat and rye. It's like they had a baby, or they're, maybe the sucrose of the wheat world. It can trigger some serious health problems or sensitivity issues in different types of people. So if you have a gluten sensitivity, you might think that you should turn to corn, rice, and quinoa, although they also contain gluten. but they don't seem to cause the same dietary issues that wheat, barley, rye, and triticale do. So, what should we do at that point? Wheat, barley, rye, and triticale, foods made from them are very common, so it's going to be really difficult to remove them from your diet, especially as it relates to your fiber intake, your vitamins, and your nutrients. So you need to be mindful about how you're choosing your food to make sure you're still getting the overall nutrition that's necessary without, eating these gluten proteins that are causing you other problems. Again, this is a good time to talk to a doctor or a dietitian. Now, why would you eat a gluten-free diet? It's really good for managing symptoms related to celiac disease and other gluten-sensitive conditions. The gluten-free diet is also really popular right now amongst people who haven't actually been diagnosed with gluten-related medical problems. The folks who tend to follow this say that they have a lot of improved health and weight loss and increased energy, but we don't have a ton of scientific research to really entirely support that yet. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just means that we need some more research to show that it is scientifically based. Now, if you do have celiac disease, though, or a gluten sensitivity, then you definitely should be talking to your doctor about this and trying to avoid gluten. Celiac happens when gluten triggers your immune system and it damages the lining of your small intestine. Remember, your small intestine has those little villi, those microvilli in there, those finger-like projections that increase your surface to volume ratio in your small intestine to help you absorb nutrients from your food. So in this case, when it damages the lining of your small intestine, you're not able to absorb those nutrients properly and a lot of the water that your body is trying to absorb from your foods. Celiac is considered to be an autoimmune disorder because your body is using the immune system to really kind of fight the gluten, and it just damages your body in the process. If you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, it might give you celiac-associated symptoms, so abdominal pain, bloating, diarrhea, constipation. It can make your brain feel kind of foggy or give you a headache or a rash, even if there is no damage to the tissues of the small intestine. So for it to be celiac, it does need to damage that intestinal lining, but you can have the other types of symptoms without damage to the intestines, and then it's a non-celiac gluten sensitivity. The immune system does play a role in non-celiac gluten sensitivity, but they don't entirely understand the process yet. So they're just going to do some more research on that, and we're going to keep an eye on it and see how it develops. I do have a lot of friends who have this non-celiac gluten sensitivity in addition to celiac, and they tell me it makes them feel, very bloated, and they have a lot of gas if they have, a lot of gluten in their diet, and it just makes their tummies hurt overall. So it will give you abdominal pain if you are experiencing this type of gluten sensitivity. And, if you're feeling that way after you eat, maybe consider reducing the amount of gluten in your diet and kind of peeling that back to see if it's still causing you problems. Because if you're not eating the gluten and you cut it out of your diet, but you're still having the symptoms, then it's something else, and it's something to talk to your doctor about. You can also have another autoimmune disorder called gluten ataxia, and that really affects some of your nerve tissues and causes muscle control and voluntary muscle movement issues. If you have another wheat allergy, it's just like other types of food allergies, and your immune system just doesn't understand that gluten or another protein found in wheat is not a disease-causing agent. Your body thinks that these proteins are a problem, like a virus or a bacteria. They think your body's being invaded. So your immune system then creates these antibodies to the proteins to try to, force it out of your body. They want to go ahead and inactivate them just like they would for a virus or a bacteria. In that case, it can result in congestion, breathing problems, or other symptoms. So it is, very much like an allergy attack of any other type. Diet details for this include, just being mindful about what you're selecting in your food, reading the labels, checking the ingredients found in your food and their nutritional content. You can have fresh food though. So there are a lot of naturally gluten-free foods out there, like fruits and vegetables. They're good for you. Beans, seeds, legumes, and nuts, as long as they are natural and unprocessed. So don't get anything that has had stuff added to them. But, you can have some, almonds, you can have walnuts, but, especially if you crack them open yourself. That way you know that they have not been processed. You can have eggs, you can have lean, non-processed meats like fish and poultry, and a lot of low-fat dairy products are totally fine for you on a gluten-free diet. Grains, starches, and flours that you can still eat include amaranth, arrowroot, buckwheat. You can have grits, polenta, and cornmeal that are all labeled gluten-free. Just double check to make sure they haven't had anything with gluten in it added as a binder. You can have flax. And then there are also a lot of gluten-free flours. You can have potato flours. Potato bread is one of my favorite types of bread. I am here for it. So you can also have corn flour. So you can have cornbread and stuff. You can have bean flours, soy, rice flour. You can have hominy, which is pretty much corn. You can have millets, quinoa, any type of rice, sorghum, soy, tapioca or cassava root, and teff. You cannot, though, have wheat, barley, rye, triticale, that baby of wheat and rye, or, also oats. You can't have that one in a lot of cases. Sometimes you can have oats. Oats are naturally gluten-free, but you have to check the label because a lot of places that process oats also process other types of grains, and you might have some cross-contamination there where some of the wheat, barley, rye, and triticale has gotten into the oats as well. So just be careful with that. We want to make sure that we're really paying attention to those labels, especially if you have celiac disease, because folks with celiac can't really tolerate the gluten-free labeled oats. Even at that point, it's still a no-go for them. So some of the things you need to know about wheat is there are several different types that contain wheat gluten. These terms are durum, einkorn, emmer, kamut, and spelt. So the wheat flours have different names based on how the wheat or the flour is milled or processed. And any of these that I'm about to list off are going to have gluten in them. So you're going to want to avoid these if you're trying for a gluten-free diet. Anything that says it's enriched flour with added vitamins and minerals. Farina, so that's milled wheat, and they use it a lot in making hot cereals. Graham flour, so no graham crackers at this point. That's a coarse whole wheat flour. Self-rising flour or phosphate flour is a no-go. And semolina is also not allowed. That is part of milled wheat that is used in pasta and couscous. So just check the labels and see if they contain gluten. Sometimes you'll be very surprised what does contain gluten, which is very similar to sodium. Sometimes you're like, why would they put sodium in that? But it's in it. Unfortunately, if you are a beer lover, if you are trying to avoid, gluten-free foods, you're going to have a hard time with this one. Alcoholic beverages that are made from gluten-free ingredients include grapes or juniper berries, and they can be labeled as gluten-free. But if you are wanting other types of alcoholic beverages, you just got to be very mindful about the type that you're drinking and what goes into it. A lot of folks who have celiac or are gluten-free in my personal life tend to drink a lot more ciders because those are generally pretty safe. Now, you can check the labels and see if the label says it was processed, treated, or crafted to remove gluten. Keep in mind that label must state the gluten content cannot be determined and the beverage may contain some gluten. So it's hard for them to really label these beverages as gluten-free. Keep that in mind when you're looking at it to see if they remove some of the gluten. They might not have been able to remove all of it. So you can, talk to your doctor about it, try it, and if it's still giving you symptoms, go ahead and maybe cut that out of your diet. A lot of processed foods contain gluten. So that includes cakes, pies, candies, cereals, even bulgur wheat. Some French fries do as well. It's crazy what all they put it on. Hot dogs can have it. Some salad dressings. Soy sauce tends to have it in it as well. I think tamari does not have gluten in it though, so check that out. You can also find it in potato chips and tortilla chips. Of course, tortilla chips, but potato chips, come on. But, soups, bouillon cubes, soup mixes, any vegetables that come in a sauce. A lot of imitation meats and seafoods also have gluten in them, as do communion wafers. So there's also a religious component in here as well. Keep in mind, we are always trying to be holistic about our health and our wellness. So keep that in mind. See if you can speak with your priest or your pastor, depending on if, you're Methodist, you're Catholic, etc., and see if there's something else that you could substitute, or if, maybe they could acquire some gluten-free communion wafers to help out with your tummy. A lot of medicines can also have gluten in them as a binding agent, so keep that in mind. Talk to your doctor, talk to your pharmacist about it. Pharmacists really are more in the know about the drugs than the doctors tend to be, because, that's what they went to school for. So they know more about the chemical composition of it. So really talk to your pharmacist. I know it can be annoying when you go up to the counter and they're like, hey, have you had this before? We're still going to talk to you about it. That's okay. They're just trying to do their job and make sure that you're fully informed. And I've told doctors before, yes, I've already had this talk with someone. And then they were like, hey, make sure that if you're taking probiotics with this, that you are taking that 2 hours apart. Or like I told you guys about the birth control and the calcium, where my doctor was like, you need to make sure you're taking these 2 to 4 hours apart. And I didn't know that before. So speaking to a pharmacist can really help out a lot. And ask questions. That is what they're there for. They are generally happy to answer them. You want to make sure that when you're going to restaurants, you really consider what you're eating. You can ask if it's gluten-free as well. And a lot more places tend to have those. The shop around the corner from my house that has really good sandwiches has gluten-free options as well as a lot of keto options. I was very surprised to see that. But it's, very popular. I consider that to be more of an Austin, Texas thing because they're hipsters up there. But even in San Antonio, where like 25% of the population has diabetes, they are offering more of these health-conscious dietary options. So just check out your general area and see if maybe you have a really awesome shop that makes that available to you as well. Now, a lot of the foods that are not included in a gluten-free diet do provide you with a lot of important vitamins and minerals. So if you are gluten-free, you're going to need to check out different ways to get iron, calcium, fiber, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, and folates, because you do need those in your diet. And also, like the paleo diet, doing a gluten-free diet generally is going to cost more money than other types of diets. Grains are cheap, is what it comes down to. And so when you're having to avoid those, then it's going to cost you more money with what you are supplementing your diet with instead. So it can be kind of expensive to follow a gluten-free diet, particularly if your diet includes a lot of foods that aren't naturally gluten-free. So try to go more for the natural approach to it, or also, talk to your doctor about what your options are. Talk to a dietitian. I think dietitians and nutritionists are really underutilized, and they can give you a lot of information about the chemical compounds in your food and ways to really get the most out of your vitamins and your nutrients and your food in general. If you are looking to do the gluten-free diet, but you are not necessarily needing to, keep that in mind. It's going to be more expensive, like the paleo diet is as well. So that might be an issue if you are looking for something that is cost-effective. Maybe try one of the others instead. We're going to go ahead and go on our final break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the diet that is recommended the most by doctors, particularly for folks with diabetes, and that is the Mediterranean diet.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Now we're going to talk about the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet is one of my favorites. It is based on traditional foods that people ate in Mediterranean countries like Italy and Greece back in 1960. At that time, they did a lot of research studies on the diets of that area and found that the people who ate those diets were exceptionally healthy when they were compared to Americans, and they had a lower risk of many lifestyle diseases in comparison. So, they have now shown in numerous studies that the Mediterranean diet can help with weight loss and preventing heart attacks, strokes, type 2 diabetes, and premature death that is, non-accidental in nature. There's no one right way to follow it because there are so many different countries that are centered around the Mediterranean Sea, and many of those people eat very different foods. You can, however, follow something that is, more or less the basics of the Mediterranean diet. But I love this one because it can also be adjusted to your individual needs and preferences. It's really a set of general guidelines more than anything. And it's delicious. So, what you can eat all the time on the Mediterranean diet is going to include vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, legumes, whole grains, breads, herbs, potatoes, spices, fish, seafood, and extra virgin olive oil. Pretty much all of the great things that I love. You can eat poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt in moderation, but I'm okay with that. I can still have cheese. I'm down. You can still have yogurt too, so if you are getting your probiotics from yogurt, you're still fine with the Mediterranean diet. You don't have to go looking for supplementary probiotics. You can have red meat, but only rarely. You can not have at all any sugar-sweetened beverages, anything with added sugars, no processed meat, no refined grains, oils, or other highly processed foods. And by oils, I mean refined oils. So check out our oils episode for more information about which ones are refined. You have to avoid certain unhealthy foods and ingredients here. That's going to be anything with added sugar. So think candies, sodas, ice cream, table sugar, sucrose. You have to avoid refined grains. So you can have a lot of wheat in here. Like, remember it said that you can have whole grains and lots of breads, but they want you to avoid white bread. They want you to avoid pasta made with refined wheat as well. So, maybe get into making your own bread at home. One of my buddies is doing that right now, and it is delicious. Plus, then you know exactly what goes into it. Avoid trans fats. Really, that is across the board for any of these diets. Just in general, avoid trans fats. They have a lot of that in margarine and a bunch of processed foods. You also want to avoid refined oils. So by that, we mean canola oil, cottonseed oil, soybean oil. Pretty much the oils that I said don't have in the oils episode. Processed meat, that one makes me really sad. I love Italian sausage, but just because it's called Italian does not mean it is okay for me to have it in the Mediterranean diet. So no processed sausages, processed meats like hot dogs, etc. You should also avoid highly processed foods. So anything that's labeled low fat or diet, or you can tell it was made in a factory, they really want you to avoid that for the Mediterranean diet. And that's a bummer, but that's okay. Fat's good for you anyway. Keep that in mind. We are going for those monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, and we want to just read the food labels mindfully to avoid unhealthy ingredients. Really, what I think a lot of this comes down to is just being mindful about what we're putting in our bodies, checking it at the grocery store, at restaurants, at friends' houses, and going from there. A lot of times when I go to a potluck type of party, I will take a gluten-free dessert and other types of gluten-free food. I try to make sure that whatever I'm making is friendly to vegans, etc., but primarily to people who tend to be gluten-free, because that's not a lot of times a lifestyle choice. I just know a lot of people who have celiac and they literally cannot be having that gluten because it's going to damage their intestines. I also respect vegans, but if I have to pick between the two, more people are gluten-free, I think, because of actual biological issues, whereas veganism it tends to be a cultural choice or a personal, moral, and ethical choice which I do respect, but I'm looking more at a needs-based issue. So if I am just bringing one dish, I'll make sure that it's the very least gluten-free, but there are a lot of really delicious gluten-free vegan dishes like cookies, desserts and stuff that can be made gluten-free and vegan are amazing. I would not think I would say that, but I had a sociology teacher in college who was vegan, and she gave us some cookies one time that she'd made at home, and they were some of the best cookies I've ever eaten. They do tend to be higher in sugar, but they are delicious. So depending on which diet you're following, there are a lot of options, and it's nice just to be nice and considerate of your friends. Now, different foods to eat, it's going to depend on which foods and which area of the Mediterranean diet you are wanting to follow. In general, though, just keep an eye on healthy plant foods. You're wanting to focus on high levels of healthy plant foods and relatively low amounts of animal foods. So this is similar to vegetarian diets, and it is really a plant-based diet. You are wanting to eat fish and seafood at least twice a week, though. So eat more fish, salmon, those heart-healthy fish like salmon, tuna. You also might want some mackerel as well. Those have a lot of omega-3 fatty acids in them. The Mediterranean lifestyle also promotes regular physical activity and also sharing meals with other people. So there's a big social component for your social wellness in the Mediterranean diet, and I enjoy that a lot. It's wanting you to cultivate joy in your life as well and centering a lot of your joy around sharing food. I'm so here for that. So if that's something you're into, try the Mediterranean diet. You do want to eat a lot of unprocessed Mediterranean foods like Brussels sprouts. I like to roast mine in the oven with a little bit of olive oil drizzle, extra virgin olive oil, and some salt and pepper, just a little bit, just enough to flavor it. It's really good. I have them first, cut them in half, and then go ahead and drizzle it, and they are delicious. I also like mine boiled, but if I boil them, I'm going to want to put, butter and stuff on them. You can have tomatoes, broccoli, kale, spinach, onions, cauliflower, carrots, cucumbers, etc. I love the Mediterranean diet too because you can go ahead and roast your cauliflower with a little bit of olive oil, some salt and pepper, and then when it is a little bit soft and you're ready to pull it out, you can put some whipped goat cheese on it, which is delicious. I just buy the goat cheese myself from the store, and then I add a little bit of heavy whipping cream to it, whip it right in my kitchen, so I know exactly what's in it. You can have figs, melons, peaches, dates, grapes, strawberries, pears, oranges, apples, bananas, all of those great fruits. The nuts and seeds are pretty much limitless. You can have pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, almonds, walnuts, macadamia nuts. So those are my favorite cookies, white chocolate macadamia nut cookies. You can have a whole bunch of legumes, including peanuts and chickpeas and just regular peas. So a lot of the other diets prohibited those, but the Mediterranean diet totally allows it. You can have tubers as well. So root and tuber foods are like potatoes, sweet potatoes, turnips, yams, etc. I don't particularly love turnips, but maybe I just haven't had the right recipe. If you have a great recipe for turnips, I would appreciate you sending it to us at the GSMC Health and Wellness account on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I'm always here for a new healthy recipe. You can have all the whole grains, so rye, barley, wheat, etc. You can even have whole grain pastas and stuff. That's one of the best parts of the Mediterranean diet. You can have sardines. I'm not a big fan of sardines, but you can have them in this diet. Trout, shrimp, oysters, clams, crab, mussels, etc. Lots of fish and seafood are on this list. You can have chicken, duck, and turkey. You can have quail, chicken, or duck eggs. For your dairy, you can have Greek yogurt, other types of yogurt, cheese, any of your herbs and spices, like all the delicious ones, like garlic. I love roasting garlic. It just brings out a full flavor profile of the garlic, and it takes some of the acrid flavor out. So if you're going to make potatoes, since you can have that on this diet, go ahead and roast some garlic in the oven with a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt and pepper. You just lop the top of the bulb off so that you can get the oil down in there. Wrap it up in a little ball of tin foil, roast it in the oven for a bit, and for about 40 minutes or so, depending on the size of it. If you're doing elephant garlic, it's going to take you a lot longer because it's a lot larger. And then you can put it on some whole grain bread. that's lightly toasted with some, a little bit of honey and a little bit of goat cheese on it. It sounds strange maybe, but it's so good. They serve it at my favorite pizza place here in town. Then you can also have basil, mint, rosemary, sage, nutmeg, cinnamon, pepper, and then healthy fats like avocado oil, avocados, extra virgin olive oil, olives. So, guacamole is approved on the Mediterranean diet. What to drink? Mostly water. You can include moderate amounts of red wine in your diet though. So up to about 1 glass per day is allowable on the Mediterranean diet. That's optional though. You don't need to be adding wine into your diet if you don't want it, and particularly if you have trouble with alcoholism or problems controlling your consumption, maybe shy away from that and stick with water. You can have coffee and tea too though, but they want you to avoid it being sugar sweetened. So my caramel macchiatos are out, and fruit juices, especially those that have added sugar in it, can not be had on this diet. You want to press your own juice, you go ahead and go for it. But they don't want you adding sugar to your tea or your coffee. All right, so to recap, today we really talked about the keto diet, we talked about the Whole30, paleo diet, gluten-free diet, and the Mediterranean diet. Out of all of these, my favorite is really the Mediterranean diet. I don't eat it all the time, but I do largely eat that. Oh, and we also talked about the DASH diet for heart health. So the Mediterranean diet, I think, is the favorite of a lot of doctors, especially a lot of diabetes-related doctors, because it's just overall a really healthy way of eating. It's good for your heart. It's good for your insulin levels. It's just good for you all around. It can also help you with weight loss. Like, you can help you with weight loss while you still get to eat breads and pastas, which is honestly, the best thing I have heard in my entire life, almost. At least when it comes to diets. So you're just avoiding things that are bad for you, that you already know are bad for you. Like no added sugar, no white bread, no trans fats, no refined oils like canola oil, no processed foods. So we already know that we're supposed to avoid those, and this is just pretty much slapping a name onto that group or that umbrella of terms that we know that we're supposed to avoid anyway. So if you're looking for a new diet, the Mediterranean diet is the one I recommend the most, but depending on the type of issues that you are facing in your personal life, you may select any of the others that I talked about today. The DASH diet, gluten-free diet, Paleolithic diet, the Whole30 diet, or the keto diet. It's just up to you. You don't even have to try all of them or any of them, but you can try multiples if you like. Just remember that with the Whole30, you want to do it for at least 30 days. That's the minimum, and no skipping, no cheating on it. All right. I hope that was illuminating for you guys today and gave you an idea of diets you may like to try. If there are any other diets that you guys are particularly curious about and you would like me to learn more about them for you and convey them over this podcast, please feel free to reach out to us via social media at the GSMC Health and Wellness accounts on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.